Today, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to focus strictly on what to look for when evaluating your anti-fatigue mats during, a site assessment or a safety sweep or whatever term you may use. Back in 1736, Benjamin Franklin famously advised the fire-threatened Philadelphians that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. All these years later, and that same philosophy applies and is especially appropriate when we consider how costly a workplace injury can be. So today we're talking about that ounce of prevention and what that can do for your company. I've done, over the years, last 15 years or so, I've done hundreds of site visits from a whole range of different types of companies. And what I find is everyone has a different opinion. A safety manager may think a mat is sound or in good shape, and the operator may be frustrated with that. A manufacturing engineer might notice 3 or 4 different issues with a particular mat, and their colleague may not see anything wrong with that one as well. So a lot of opinions out there as well. And to help cut through kind of that noise and make sure you get a consistent result, we've developed this formal mat inspection process that we're going to share today. Obviously, opinions matter, and you should always consider those and make note of those and document those as well. But this process is to help you make decisions based on facts, first and foremost. And last thing to note here as well is that we do provide here at Acromat, we provide those site assessments completely free if you ever do need a hand. So our goal today is to give you the tools and resources that you can use to build into your own programs. But if you do have a need that you'd like a hand with, we are happy to do that at no cost. We cover the travel and everything as well. It's our pleasure to help create those safer work environments for your teams. So here's a look at our mat inspection checklist. It's a really simple document, one that we'll share after this webinar that you can use as well. If you would like to take some of this and build it into your own format, that's fine as well. What it does is it dictates the 7 most common and critical anti-fatigue mat safety hazards that we've identified that you need to watch out for and document as you go. As we touched on the last slide, this inspection checklist and the process of this is all about removing the opinions and dealing with the facts so that you can get a consistent result with your ergo mats. You can certainly integrate the opinions and feedback. You see the comments section there, so you can incorporate all that as well. But it helps to make informed decisions instead of decisions just based on opinion. So after the inspection is complete, you can make copies for your team to review. You can do a walkthrough together. You can compare maybe with other shifts or other departments, other lines, and kind of pull all that together. And then you can use this document, or if you have your own, the key thing is consistency. So evaluate each mat with the same parameters. And this document is going to call out those 7 critical issues that you want to look for. And what we're going to do as we go through this session today is dive into each one of these 7, kind of unpack what each one means with some visual examples as well. But first of all, we're going to just share some insight from our audience. So we polled, in the lead up to this webinar, we polled over 90 of our registrants for this webinar. And the first question we asked was, do you have a formal anti-fatigue mat process? And the interesting thing here is 76% of the audience that we polled said they either didn't have a formal process or they were unsure about it. So that really shows that there's a lot of room for improvement in this area. We followed that question up with what triggers a new mat search or a purchase within your facility. And interestingly enough, 28% of the responses mentioned the word complaint in their response. We often say that a complaint is too late because it puts the operator at risk of injury, and it may also mean a very costly process for your company to fix that. So just back to that quote earlier, just remember, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can get in there and be proactive, which is what you're seeing on that number 3 there, the proactive efforts, which 24% had put down as their answers as well. That's really, we want to elevate that and get that to the top of the list, get more people following this proactive approach. Further insight from the audience here, another question on the poll. What's the most common complaint you receive about the mats in your facility? So one thing to note here is that safety is, we're all in it together industry, and sharing is great in the safety world. And as you can see, whether mats that curl or slide, or if you're feeling limited to rectangle mats that don't fit, many of the challenges that you're facing are being faced by others in the industry too. It's not unique to you. And so that's one of the reasons we like to offer these webinars, is to bring our peers together to share, what problems each one is going through, and then some tips and some tools that everyone can benefit from that might be able to help improve those issues. So first up, number one on the inspection checklist is about overlapping and incorrectly sized mats. So this is number one for a reason, because I truly believe that the right size mat eliminates, honestly, 80% of all the hazards, as well as a lot of the operator complaints. Even the best mat that you can get will cause problems and safety issues if it's not sized correctly. So in the last slide, we looked at 35% of the people we polled had said common complaints are about the mats being too small or the wrong shape. And one of the reasons for this could be that companies don't know that custom is an option, or maybe the process for getting a custom mat is overly complex, so they just kind of settle for rectangular mats to cover an area. And also, we find too, as you can see in some of these pictures, that often mats are relocated or repurposed from another area and just kind of made to fit. And that's never a great approach, because as you can see from these pictures, you're getting these overlapping, incorrectly sized mats. It leaves exposed cement, trip hazards. You can have sliding mats along with, a whole name of other hazards that are present as well. So the photo in the middle is actually an area where an operator actually fell and broke their wrist because of this setup. So you may have setups that look just like this in your facility, and I can tell you without a doubt that it is dangerous, and you can lead to some serious injuries with things that look like that. So just be mindful of those things. Don't wait for a complaint. We can get proactive to address these. The one on the right, the picture on the right, that shows the custom mat for the same company, the kind of things that they use to eliminate that issue after the injury happened. You can see an anti-slip surface, drainage holes, so it eliminated the slipping issues, as well as the whole area being covered to ensure one-piece consistency throughout. Next to machine-related incidents, slipping and tripping and falling is the leading cause of injury in manufacturing. Curling borders, broken bevels, one of the most frequent things we get called about are those exact issues. So you'll notice in these pictures, you've got bevels curling upwards, could be because the mat's not the right one for the application. Another common one, which you see on the left-hand picture there, where you're getting mats in maybe long rolls and then you're cutting them to length, you're actually eliminating a bevel when you make that cut, so that can cause an issue as well. So you can see some examples here of what that looks like. During your inspection, if you do notice over and over again it's the same type of mat that's curling, what you may want to do as a proactive approach for that is to contact your mat supplier or your manufacturer and talk about that very issue before investing in your next round of mats. So maybe there's a warranty that could be included that covers curling or something like that, or maybe you need a different type of mat for that environment. The photo on the right, that shows kind of the response to these questions. We actually cut the yellow borders right into the material itself instead of having an overlap. And that eliminates the risk of curling. And that's also built into our 2-year warranty that it won't curl over time. Number 3 is about visible damage, rips and tears. So this is one of the reasons it's really important to actually get out and do the physical assessment and get your eyes on it so that you can see what's happening. Noting visible damage is not just about identifying the mats that you need to be replaced, but also protecting the mats that are still sound. So as you can see in this middle picture here, the table legs in this process are in danger of puncturing this mat as they're set on top of it. So catching issues like this before they become a problem can be a great way to extend the life of your mats and prevent any future damage. The other pictures you see in here, erosion on the top just because of the type of material that's being used in a harsher environment. And then on the other one, we've got modular tiles that are pulling apart and causing that trip hazard at the seams. So both of those just show that probably a different type of material or a different type of mat would be a better fit for those applications. And those are things that you can really easily identify when you're out there and you're able to get a visual on the actual mats themselves. Stacked mats, something we see often, very often in fact, and actually this was also included in our pre-webinar questions. 50% of the audience says they've noticed stacked mats in their facilities. So very common. If you see it, you're not alone, because a lot of other facilities have the same issues as this. So operators often stack their mats because they think that the extra cushion is going to be helpful. In reality, it's doing more harm than good. And so prior to this webinar, we did reach out to a certified ergonomist and get some insight into why stacking mats isn't ideal. And I'll just read this quote here. It says, "It's common for stacked mats to be different sizes and even different products, which creates uneven standing surfaces. This is awkward and exposes employees to hazards like slipping, tripping, falling, and rolled ankles. Stacked mats may seem to have subjectively more cushion, which is perceived as a good thing. This creates postural instability and can cause the feet, ankles, and upwards to the lower back to have to make micro adjustments, like working in high heels every day. This causes discomfort, fatigue, and injuries over time that employees don't directly associate with the mat." So thank you for that insight, Mary. That's very helpful, and just goes to show maybe the sort of unseen hazards of having the mats stacked up. So if you're finding it is happening, it's likely a sign that your mats aren't providing enough support, or they're long past their useful life. It's important to share with operators how this can lead to these MSDs over time, like chronic back pain, tendonitis, whatever it might be. You need to be able to educate and share that with the operators as to why that's an issue. Number 5, incorrect mats for the application. So there's hundreds of mat types, styles on the market, and roughly 80% of manufacturing companies that we surveyed report not having a standard for anti-fatigue matting in place. So this can lead to many different people being involved in the ordering and the purchasing process, and areas getting filled up with mats that don't exactly fit the need. So as you can see here on the left, these mats are too small, they're poorly placed, prone to sliding, the middle sections are coming apart, shows the material isn't really holding up for this particular environment. After an assessment, the company improved that area, designed a one-piece custom 101 series mat. The nitrile is much better suited to hold up in that environment, and the custom shape then prevented any sort of sliding or slipping, as you can see there from before. So just make sure that the mats that you have in your areas are suited for the application where they are placed. Number 6 is about cords, cables, and other trip hazards. Kind of goes back to the visual assessment as well. Just make sure you are able to notice if there's anything else that's may cause a hazard in the area. So cords and cables, they're not necessarily an anti-fatigue mat hazard, but they are important to document because they create trip hazards in those areas. So they can be resolved with the use of anti-fatigue mats properly placed. The middle photo, you'll see those loose cords laying on the ground, clear trip hazard there. On the right shows an example of what a flat cable cover designed into the middle part of the mat could look like. Those cords and cables can travel underneath, eliminating the errant cords that are laying on top, and then removing that as a hazard from the area. So just keep in mind those things. Obviously, we can't list every type of trip hazard that may be out there, but you're able to note that as you go during your assessment. Number 7, mats sliding, slippery. Don't have much to say here, but mats that are the wrong material for the environment, maybe they lack the anti-slip backing, maybe they're designed too small for the area in the first place. Those are all prone to sliding around. You kind of I often hear people talk about they went to step on a small mat and it kind of just went out from under them like a skateboard. And that can happen if it's not the right setup for the area. So as I mentioned before, I really do believe that the right size mat eliminates a lot of these issues, especially the slippery sliding issue that you see here. So you can see from the example on the screen, but a mat that's fit, it doesn't really have an option to move. It is fit to the work area. The other thing to think about here too is maybe it is a smaller area and there is that sliding issue. You can always use the Grip Coat X non-slip backing. You could use maybe an industrial tape around the outside or something like that. There's lots of creative ways you can do it to make sure the mats don't slip and slide around in those areas. Lastly, a question of ergonomic support. So this one comes up often as well. It doesn't have its own column on the checklist, but should be noted and included in the comments section as you're going. And how can you tell if the ergonomic support of your mat is gone? Question is often raised and is maybe a hard one to get a specific answer on. But here's a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you. Not exactly a science, but these are the 5 things that I would suggest to look out for when answering this question. First of all, the eye test. You can tell a lot by looking at something, if it's still doing its job or not. Observe the operator and see how the mat is performing whilst they're doing their work. Second one, really important, life expectancy. So every mat that you're going to have when it was purchased had some kind of a life expectancy. And if it's beyond that by a long time, most likely is it's lost its ergonomic benefit. So some mats maybe need to be replaced every 6 months, but they're still in place 2 years later. Probably not going to be doing you a lot of good at that point. So think about the life expectancy of the mat that you have and you're assessing, and just compare that to how long you've had it in place. Again, talk to the operators. They will tell you. And with this one, jump on the mat yourself and stand on it. And if it doesn't feel much different than the concrete, chances are it's probably feeling that way for the operator as well, and the ergonomic benefit is no longer there. Another common one, if you see them flipped upside down, that is often a sign that they are not happy with the performance. They think, kind of like a pillow. If I flip it over, it's going to give me a little more life. So that's always a trigger as well if you see that. And as well as mats being stacked up. So obviously they're not getting what they want out of the first one, so they add another one on top. So those are all kind of 5 key ways that I would suggest on thinking about that question of ergonomic support. So just to summarize, as everyone knows here today, we've talked about it a lot, but safety needs to be proactive. When an injury happens, it's too late and it can be very costly to fix. So we'd encourage you to put this into action, get a plan so that injuries don't have to happen or are not even likely to happen. Making time to inspect your mats, having this formal process to do so, it gives you a way and your company a way to plan and prioritize and budget for the necessary changes that are ahead. Once an injury's happened and you have to make a change, as I've mentioned, it can be very costly. Maybe you don't have it in the budget, but you have to do it anyway. This is a way to get ahead of that and plan for the changes that need to be made. It's also important to note that taking time to do an inspection doesn't mean that everything has to get flipped on its head. You can start simply with, a single line per month, per week, whatever. It's just a simple proactive way that you can make sure that you're sending your people home as safe and as healthy as when they arrived at work. And I'm going to end with a quote that I love and I often refer to, and that is that the standard that you accept is the standard that you walk past. And by that, we just mean if you're walking past a particular work area that has a mat that has a problem, if you walk past it and ignore it, that's the standard you're accepting. If we can just build that into a documented process to say, we've got it on the radar, we're going to fix it, here's how we're going to do that, here's what it's going to take. So with that, we're going to jump into some Q&A. Got a handful of questions come in already by the looks, which is great. All right. Cameron asks, what's the best method to clean acromats that have the adhesive backing, and by that, that means the grip coat non-slip backing. Our facility has a large amount of dust byproduct that tends to get underneath them and prevents them from gripping correctly. It can be an issue, Cameron. And as far as the cleaning, we did have a webinar session on that a few months ago, which we can get you the link to as well. We'd recommend some sort of maybe a pressure washer or wash down with a scrub brush or something like that to be able to get that dust and byproduct off. And after a few washings, you may need to recoat that backing as well to give it a fresh boost as well. So hopefully that helps. Another thing that's worked well is to actually use a heavy duty floor tape around the edge of the mat, and that helps to prevent some of the dust and stuff from getting under there in the first place. So hopefully that helps. We can follow up with more on that too later, Cameron, if you need more help. Dennis asks a question here. Great question, Dennis. If we have a large surface area to have new matting installed, so you send the mats in pieces and come on site to mend them together, is there an additional charge for having you mend and install the mats? Do you offer training on how to mend the mats together so they are one solid piece? Great questions. So sometimes if a mat is too big to handle logistically, it does have to come in a couple of sections, or if it's going around a column or a work area that it has to be in two pieces, then it will need to be final bonded on site. We can offer that service as well. There's usually a fee for the install, but we also offer the repair kit, which is something that your team can use to do those final bonds as well. And there is some training videos, and we did a webinar on that as well, Dennis. So we can follow up with that one as well to make sure you get the resources you need. Brenda asks a great question. One of our buyers is asking how these are shipped as they appear seamless. So that's a great question, Brenda. So we do, as often as possible, we make the mats to one piece to avoid any potential trip and fall hazards that may be present from seams. And so we will pack those up, depending on the size of the mat, either it's rolled or folded, put on a pallet or a skid or something like that. And then it's shipped as one piece so that when you get it, all you have to do is clean your area and unroll that mat and lay it out. So there's no additional need for, kind of connecting it together after the fact. So as often as possible, we certainly appreciate making them as one piece. Those are great questions. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. We did have a couple of others come in before as well. Question from Tom on how often do you recommend conducting an inspection? And there's not really a science to that, whatever works for your schedule, but just keep in mind that manufacturing is dynamic and changing all the time. So you want to be able to kind of account for that in your inspection process. I would say that each area should be on some sort of a rotation where you're maybe doing an inspection every month, but you're getting around the whole facility in every, say, 6 to 12 months, so that you're not leaving any area uncovered. And then last question here from Lauren says, how do you prioritize or balance feedback with the facts? So that's something we discussed a little bit earlier, and that's a great question as well. Certainly capture the feedback from the operators, and you just want to try and be able to separate opinion from the fact, and that's why the checklist has been created to help you do that, so that you're able to make decisions based on the same level playing field for every area. The other thing to point operators back to is your standard work instruction. So once you have that in place, these are the options, these are the types of mats that are used in these areas, and then you can pair up the feedback or opinions you're getting with the standard that you've created, and that can help level it all out. So I trust that's been helpful. We thank you all very much for your time.